Hey, what's up, bosses? Derek Sparks here. Another great interview for you. I'm talking to the author of the new book called Exit Rich. Her name is Michelle Seiler Tucker. Michelle is the founder and CEO of Seiler Tucker Incorporated, and they've closed deals on over 1,000 businesses. So they're definitely pros in the M&A world. On this interview, we're going to go over her two main methods called the GPS model and the 6 Ps. These are all keys to getting the most money possible when you are selling your business. So even if you're not looking to sell your business quite yet, you're definitely going to get a lot of great information out of this interview. And Exit Rich, the new book, is co-authored by Sharon Lechter. If that name sounds familiar, Sharon was also the co-author on a book we talk a lot about on this show, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And the connections don't even stop there. Michelle even got original Shark Tank member Kevin Harrington to write the foreword on this book. So definitely look forward to talking about that. Before we get into the interview, I just want to do a quick plug for our sponsor this week. It's Indeed.com. Indeed is the largest job site on the planet. But if you think they're just for those large corporations with 3,000 employees, they're also just as effective for small companies. So whether you have 3 or 3,000 employees, Indeed is the place to go. They even got a new feature called Instant Match. That gives you qualified candidates after they search millions of resumes instantly once you post your job post. You literally post your post and they will send you a ton of qualified candidates right away. And if you want to post a job, we got the best offer anywhere. Just for Invest Like a Boss listeners, you can head to Indeed.com/iLab. That's Indeed.com/ILAB. If you go to that link, we got you $75 to boost your job post. Simple as that. All right, with that said, let's get into the interview. It's Michelle Seiler Tucker on Invest Like a Boss. We recently found out last year our hottest shows on Invest Like a Boss were about buying businesses. So I thought it'd be interesting to have a guest on to talk about the other side of this, selling your business. And why not have an expert who sold over 500 businesses through her firm? Her name is Michelle Seiler Tucker, author of the new book called Exit Rich. Thank you for joining Invest Like a Boss. How are you doing, Michelle?
I'm doing great, Derek. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Definitely. I am excited to talk about this. Why don't you give our listeners a little bit more about your background, how you came into the excuse me if I could talk today, M&A world, and what we need to know about you.
Sure. So I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always said I'm going to be my own boss and not work for anybody. Even as a little girl, I was never a typical little girl. I never played with toys or dolls or anything like that. I would always walk around with a notebook and I'd walk up to complete strangers and ask them a bunch of questions.
Love that.
And so my mom's like, she's going to be the next Barbara Walters. So I was just always curious about people, and I've always been a people person. I've always been a problem solver, and I've always been solution oriented. So I've owned small businesses, gosh, pretty young age. I've been in the printing industry, event space, medical technology, graphics, are some of the industries I've been in. And I did kind of get sucked up into corporate America when Xerox recruited me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I should try corporate America. So I did that. And within 6 months, my nickname became the closer because when somebody couldn't close a deal, they would call me and I could always get the deal done. So my nickname was the closer. So within 6 months, my supervisor came to me and said, Michelle, you really should throw your name in the hat and apply for the regional vice president in Xerox. She goes, you're not going to get it because you're applying with people who've been here for 5, 10, 15 years, and you've only been here for 6 months. And I'm like, well, why would I apply for something I'm never going to get? Sounds like a colossal waste of time to me. And she goes, because of the experience, you will learn more throughout this process of interviewing with all these high level executives than you'll ever learn doing anything else. And she was right. Xerox has the best training in the world. And so I did that. I threw my name in a hat. It was a 3-month grueling process where we had to meet with all the high levels executives and ask them questions. And of course, they ask us questions. And we had to do a presentation and a needs analysis and demonstrate the Xerox equipment to these high level executives. So it was a lot of pressure. Anyway, I ended up getting it, even when I was told I would never get it. So I truly am, I guess, a closer. And I hated it though, because I went from sales to management. And when you're in high level management for a Fortune 500 company, you're having meetings to have meetings to have meetings to schedule more meetings. And then you're not really doing what you love anymore. So it was at that point where I said, I love my six figures checks. I love my benefits. I love the people I work with, but I miss entrepreneurship. So I started searching for a franchise to buy and stumbled across a company that had a couple of locations. My husband knew the founder, and I approached him about buying a franchise. And they said, "No, we don't want you to buy a franchise. We want you to partner with us, and we'll give you a franchise. We want you to put us on the map." And I said, well, "Listen, I'm not going to leave my six-figure career with great benefits because I was climbing that corporate ladder pretty quick at Xerox." And I said, "But I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll try it for 6 months and I'll keep my day job." So weekends, evenings, I would fly out to different events, franchise shows, have my own trade shows, etc. And within 6 months, I sold so many franchises and made more money than I made an entire year, actually 2 years at Xerox. So I said, you know what? This is the right move. So I transitioned. So I left Xerox, went in to be a franchise partner. That's what started my franchise development, franchise consulting, franchise sales career. And then this franchisor did what most owners do. They focus on growth and they focus on sales. They don't focus on building a solid foundation to handle the growth. So if a company doesn't lay the foundation and they start growing at a rapid speed, I mean, I sold 300 franchises in a very quick period of time, then their whole house is going to come crumbling down. And that's what happened. So they were over promising, under delivering. They weren't servicing the franchisees. I'm friends with the franchisees. They're my family now. And so I was always taking up for them. Of course, my partner's mad at me, thinking I should take up for them. Anyway, I just realized very quickly that our values were not aligned. And that's when I said, look, you need to buy me out because I'm not going to sell any more franchises because I can't in good faith. And so
Sure.
anyway, they bought me out. And I'm like, oh, what am I going to do now? And I said, well, I should transition into selling companies because how much harder could it be to sell a company versus selling a franchise, a new franchise? It's a lot harder, a lot more moving parts, a lot more intricate details, a lot more emotions involved on both sides, buyer and seller. Anyway, so I ended up transitioning to selling companies. They did buy me out. And I started, selling small companies at first. And I transitioned very quickly into selling large businesses. And my company that I own has sold over 1,000 transactions. I personally have done over 500, and we've done thousands of evaluations. I also learned very quickly that what Steve Forbes says is true. 8 out of 10 businesses will not sell. So I said, gosh, if I don't start fixing these businesses and growing them and have a build to sell plan for the owner, I'm going to starve to death and they're going to end up going out of business. So that's really what inspired me to really become the leading expert in buying, selling, growing, and fixing companies. So I buy companies and flip them like somebody would flip real estate. And I also partner with business owners, investing my money, time, energy, effort to grow that business so they actually have a sellable asset.
Sure. So that brings me to let's just jump right into it. So when should business owners prepare to sell their company? Is
From
it from
day
the
one,
beginning? Is it when you're in a financial trouble? Obviously, there's a lot of different circumstances, but when should you really think about preparing to sell your company?
so the perfect time, the ideal time to sell your business is when your business is doing well. So you really should plan your exit from the start of starting your business or buying a business. And most business owners are like, oh, that's crazy. That makes no sense. Well, yes, it does. It makes perfect sense. Most business owners don't think about selling until an internal or external catastrophic event has occurred. So they won't call me until there's death in the family, or the owner died, or there's a partner dispute, or health issues, or COVID. And
Sure.
that's the worst time to sell because your business is not doing well at that point.
And
And
I think
so,
that's why we saw the trend last year, at least with listeners on our show. They were all scrambling to buy businesses when COVID first hit. So maybe trying to capitalize on something like that when you're saying that's the absolute worst time to sell.
it's a great time for buyers
Yeah.
trying to acquire businesses with little to no money down and using the assets of the business to purchase the company, that's a great time for investors and turnaround specialists. It's not a good time for sellers because they're going to be selling for pennies on the dollar, or they'll close their business or have to file bankruptcy. So it's not the ideal time for business owners because these buyers are not going to give you a premium price. So the best time to sell your business and exit rich instead of exiting poor is when your business is doing well and at the top of its game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're saying, think about how you're going to position your business to sell right from the start, which I think a lot of these business owners that we see overvalue their own companies because they put a lot of sweat equity into these businesses, and they're valuing their personal time. And maybe in their heads, they're thinking this company is worth X amount when really it's worth, X minus 10 amounts in
Right.
real life. So how do you talk owners into realizing an actual fair value for their company?
So the main reason the owners overvalue their business is not so much about the sweat equity. They value their business based upon what they need to do next. So if they're going to sell their business and retire, then they're like, "Oh, I need $10 million. I'm going to sell I want to sell my business for $10 million." And then I'll look at their financials and normalize their financials, and they're making 100 grand, and I'm like,
Sure.
"You're not going to get $10 million for 100 grand of EBITDA." And and I go,
I
and
think
I
that's I
always
think that's
ask,
the I think that's like the like we see on Shark Tank, I made
yeah,
$10,000 last year, but I want 2.5 million.
right. And so I always ask them, how did you come up with that number? And it's never based upon sweat equity or anything like that. It's always based upon, well, that's what I need to retire on, or that's what I need to put five
Gotcha.
girls through college and pay for their weddings, or
Which
that's
has
what
nothing
I,
to do with their business.
which
So,
has nothing to do with their business. So business owners base the value of their business on what they need to do. So rather they need to get out of debt, rather they need to get kids through college, rather they need to pay for daughters' weddings, rather they need to pay for retirement, buy another business, start another business. That's how they base the value of their business. So what I do is I take them through the process. I take them through the GPS exit model. I take them through the 6 Ps, and then I take them through the process and what I call the buyer sanity check and the seller sanity check. And I explain to them, what buyers buy, what buyers are willing to pay money for. And it's typically a multiple of EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. And you're not going to get 20 times multiple if you don't have the right synergies in place. And most businesses do not have the right synergies in place to get a high multiple like that. And then I show them industry standards. I show them business comps. I sit down and explain to them, if a buyer was going to buy your business and pay you $10 million and you're making 100 grand, this is how long it would take them to get their money back. So it would
they're going
take
to be
them
dead before
forever
they
to
get
get
it
their
back.
money back. So it just doesn't make any sense. So anyway, I go through that whole process with them. Most M&A advisors, business brokers, a lot of them don't do that. They'll just take the listing or the engagement for whatever the seller wants and stick it up there on the listing sites and hope somebody will bite and then educate the buyer. And I mean educate the seller. That's the wrong protocol. It's really the broker's job, the M&A advisor's job, to educate the seller on the value of the business. So if my sellers are not realistic and they won't listen to me, I tell them to go call another broker because I'm not your person.
Sure. So do you think the reason 80% of businesses don't sell is because they are overvalued?
I think well, there's a lot of reasons. Number one, they are overvalued. They're overpriced. They're not functioning in all 6 Ps. The business is dependent upon the owner. You pull that owner out of the business, there is no business. So there's a lot of reasons why they don't sell, but the number one reason is they're overpriced. And number two is that they don't function on all 6 cylinders, all 6 Ps. They haven't built a business that buyers actually want to buy. And that's why you should plan your exit. You should really build a business that buyers are willing to pay you top dollar for.
Sure. So let's go over a couple of those principles quick. I don't want to give away the whole book. It is called Exit Rich, which
We
will
could
be
talk for 20 hours and not give away the whole book. There's so much content in this book.
well, that's good. That means there's a lot of good content in there. Once again, it's called Exit Rich. Michelle Seiler Tucker is our guest. Let's start with one I kind of read up on a little bit. I'll be honest with you. I didn't read the entire book, but I got a couple chapters in. Your GPS model. Tell us a little bit about that.
So my GPS exit model is what I call the ST, Seller Tucker GPS exit model. And this is a roadmap for business owners. So again, the biggest mistake that business owners make is they don't plan their exit. They don't think about selling until they have to. We plan for everything else in our life, but business owners don't plan for their biggest assets. So number one in a GPS exit model is you need to know where you're going. Most business owners don't know where they're going. They have no end game. They have no destination, no desired price tag. So when you want to drive somewhere, what's the first thing you do? You pull out your phone, right? You plug in your destination. Your car needs to know where you're going. So same thing with your business, because you need to figure out where you're going, what is your end game, what is your desired sales price. Otherwise, business owners are just driving around aimlessly. They're going around and around in circles or driving up and down those financial hills to end up nowhere. In most cases, to end up out of business. Okay. Because so many businesses will go out of business. So you need to plug in your destination. You need to know, what do you want to sell your business for? If you want to sell your business for $20 million, then great. We got a number. We got
Sure.
something to work with, right? So say, okay, I want to sell my business for $20 million. Now, what do you need to know in the GPS formula? You need to know where you're starting from. What's your current location? What is your current valuation? What is your business worth right now today? And you'd be surprised how many business owners have no idea what their business is worth. Most humans will get an annual physical checkup, right? We bring our car in to get a checkup tune up. We bring our pets in to get checked up, but we never get a checkup or an evaluation on our business. Most business owners have no clue what their business is worth. And you should always get a valuation checkup every single year, because there are events that can cause your business to increase in value or decrease in value, like COVID. COVID has caused some industries to really increase, where others have plummeted and are decreasing. So you need to know where you want to end up, $20 million. Then you need to know where you're starting from. So let's say you're starting from $5 million. You're worth $5 million today. You want to sell for 20 million. Now you need to know time frame. So let's say you want to do that in 7 years. Got a business you want to sell for $20 million. You're worth 5 million today. You want to do this in 7 years. Now you need to know who your buyers are. Buyers, not buyer. A lot of
Mhm.
sellers will say, "Oh, I got a buyer I'm going to sell it to." I can almost promise you that buyer's not going to buy your business. Okay. Most buyers that sellers are working with, the deal never comes to fruition. So you always want to have backup buyers, because deals fall apart. So you want to have buyers, not buyer. There's five different types of buyers. I'll tell you who's not going to buy a $20 million company. It's going to be a first time buyer. First time buyers are not going to be able to afford a $20 million company. Turnaround specialists will not buy a $20 million company because they buy distressed assets, right?
Mhm.
So who's going to buy your company? Either a private equity group, a strategic slash competitor, or a serial entrepreneur. So now you need to know, okay, those are my three types of buyers. What do the financials have to look like? For me to sell a $20 million company, where do the gross revenues need to be? Where does the cost of goods need to be? Profit margins, most importantly, EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. Where does that number need to be? To get $20 million, you need to have at least $2 to $3 million in EBITDA, at least. Okay. Then you need to ask yourself, those buyers, what are they looking for? Okay. What synergies will they pay more money for? How do I build my business to meet their buying criteria? And then you build to suit.
Sure.
Just like you start when you start a business, what do? You do market research. You find out who's your ideal client. What's your customer acquisition cost? What problem are you solving? What makes you different than anybody else? Same thing with building your business to sell. Who's your ideal buyers? What's their financial criteria? What's their buying criteria? What's the characteristics that they look for? Okay. And then you need to know your why. And the reason everybody's like, well, what do you mean by why? Everybody knows that you have to have a strong enough motivation to keep you in the game. And that's your why. Why do you want to sell your business for $20 million? You have to have a really, really, really strong reason why you want to accomplish that goal. Because if you don't, you'll never do it. If it was easy to sell a $20 million business, everybody would be doing it, right?
Exactly.
So you have to have a strong enough why to keep you in the game, to keep you motivated. It's not easy to stay in business. There's a lot of financial hurdles. There's a lot of catastrophic events that occur, internal and external. So you have to have a powerful enough why to keep you in the game. So that's really the GPS exit model. Does that make sense?
Totally. I mean, I think a lot of people just get caught up in growing their business, and then they never think about the exit strategies. So all of that it makes sense. It's just the exact inverse of the start, and
Right. You
I could see a lot of people missing that whole principle though. At the same time,
Right. And you got to reverse engineer it. You got to get a plan, $20 million and reverse engineer it. But a lot of people are not even so busy growing their business. They're so busy just being stuck in their business,
sure.
and doing the day to day transactions. I mean, so many business owners wear so many different hats. And I think if you want it done right, you have to do it yourself. Or so many
Yeah, and I think that's why
entrepreneurs.
they can't take an outside look to the actual status of
Right.
their business too, because they're too involved inside it.
They're too involved, right? And then they're control freaks. A lot of entrepreneurs don't want to let go of things because they're control freaks.
I've run
So
into that problem myself. I'm working on that.
you got to work on that because here's the bottom line. I mean, you don't grow a business, you grow people, and people grow the business.
Exactly.
And
That's
if a
definitely
business
one
has
of the
a
things
thought,
I'm working on right now is learning to put trust into other people and not have to do everything yourself.
yeah, and people is number one in the six P's.
So let's go over the 6 P's. I think that's the fourth time you brought that up now. So I feel like Michelle is really into her 6 P's. Let's go
Well,
over
the
those
reason
briefly.
here's why I'm into my six P's. Because even if you don't want to sell your business, and even if you say, well, I'm never going to sell my business, which is really a bad attitude because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, I had a
Sure.
client that got diagnosed with prostate cancer and he had like a year or two to live. I had another client that had a massive heart attack and died. So you just never know. You should always build your business that it is sellable if something happens to you. Okay.
Makes
So
sense.
the reason the six P's are so important is because I go back to my franchisor. When I partnered with this franchisor, he never built a solid foundation. So therefore, the house of cards came crumbling down on them because they didn't put all the structure in place. So the six P's are designed to build a sustainable business that can scale. And when you're ready, sell. Okay. So number one is people. And the reason people are so important is because like you right now, you probably don't have a business to sell because you're doing everything, right?
Sure.
And same thing, like I have a dentist, a dentist that wants to sell. We're actually selling one of their relatives' agriculture business. And they said, well, we want you to sell the dentist practice. I go, how many dentists? And they said, one. He's the owner. He has a couple hygienists. I said, it's not sellable. He's got to get an associate in there. Or if we do sell it, he's got to stay on for two to
You'd
three
have to stay
years. Is
on.
he
Yeah.
willing to stay on? And they said no. And I said, well, then it's not sellable. Okay. Same thing with chiropractor. Thing with interior decorator. Same thing with, podcast host, if they don't have a business. So the bottom line is you got to have people and you got to have people in the right seats. A lot of companies will have people, but they have them in the wrong positions. And then you have to ask the who question, Derek. You have to ask who opens the door, who deals with clients, who handles customer service issues, who handles legal, accounting, logistics, transportation, manufacturing, you know, environmental. Who handles all of this? And the clue, Derek, is you should never be next to the who.
I like
Okay.
that.
So there's some things that probably only you can do, like host your podcast, but you can get other hosts in to host your podcast as well. You want to create a business that works for you rather than you working for it because buyers don't buy a job. Buyers want to buy a business, not a job. So the who's are really important. The people in your organization is everything. Number two is product. So you have to ask yourself, your product, your industry, is it on the way up or is it on the way out? Restaurants are where? On the way out
Well,
right
for
now.
now, yes.
For now. And that's the thing about industries. Your industry could be up here and then something can happen and bam, it's down here. Look at oil right now. Oil
Sure.
has had a terrible last 3 years, and I don't think it's going to get any better anytime soon. So you got to ask yourself, do you have an Amazon or do you have a Blockbuster?
Hmm.
If you have an Amazon, that's awesome. If you have a Blockbuster, time to pivot. And you need to start asking yourself three transformational questions. This is what Amazon did. Amazon asked themselves, what business are we in? And they said, you know what? We sell books. Then they asked themselves, what do we do really, really, really well? And I said, we do fulfillment really well. Then they asked themselves, what business should we be in? And they said, we should be in the fulfillment business. Sounds simple, but these three transformational questions transform them into a bookseller company, into a multi billion dollar worldwide conglomerate. Those three questions. But a lot of times when you're in your fog, it's foggy. And when you're in the middle of the chaos, it's hard to see your business clearly. So you really need an outsider's perspective. Does that make
That totally
sense?
makes sense. Yeah.
So, and then the next P is processes. And processes are so important and typically overlooked. A lot of business owners don't even think about processes until something bad happens. Like somebody gets hurt in manufacturing. Oh, we need a process for that. A
Hmm.
client complains and puts it all over the internet. Oh, we need a process for that. No, you really need to develop your processes from the beginning and tweak them as you go. Back in the 40s, I don't know if you ever watched the movie The Founder based upon the McDonald's story.
Oh yeah, I really like that with Michael Keaton.
Great movie, right?
Yes, it was great.
Fabulous movie. I mean, the McDonald's brothers started McDonald's, but then Ray Kroc came in and grew the business and then pretty much stole it from the McDonald brothers.
Yeah, he
But
wasn't painted as the greatest guy ever.
no, he wasn't.
Great movie
But
though.
there would be no McDonald's if there was no Ray Kroc,
Sure.
because the McDonald's would have never grown it to the way that Ray Kroc grew it. So anyway, on processes, remember back in the 40s in the movie, they had the Sonic type restaurants where people would come out, roller skates, take your orders, and the food was always cold, took so long, and the order was typically wrong. So McDonald's brothers back in the 40s said, we're going to develop a restaurant, a fast food restaurant, and it's our mission or vision, but we want our customer experience to be this. We want our customers to get great tasting food that's hot, quick, 2 minutes or less. How are we going to accomplish that? And then do you remember in the movie they took all their employees to the tennis court, to the empty tennis court?
Yeah, they did like kind of painted out like almost like an assembly line type process. It
Yeah.
was a really cool scene. Yeah.
Yeah, really cool. And I did it all day because I had to keep moving everything because it wasn't working until they figured out who's going to take the order, who's going to toast the buns, who's going to cook the burger, who's going to put the pickles on the buns and give it to the client 2 minutes or less. Those processes that McDonald's started with is why you can eat at a McDonald's in Singapore, Russia, Australia, USA, because of those processes. They have to be productive and efficient. Make sense?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I like that.
And you know what else? Here's a big thing too. You'd be surprised. We're selling a $70 million company, and they hardly have any policy and procedure manuals. They don't have no SOP checklist. So when a
I
buyer,
think we've seen this a lot where especially COVID has really exposed this with a lot of businesses too, that there was no plan.
yeah, because everybody's used to working working in their building, working in the business, working in the office, and there was no plan. I mean, there was no plan that, hey, I mean, in New Orleans we're a little bit more prepared, I think, than the rest of the country, because every year we have like 5 or 6 hurricanes. So
Sure.
we have protocols in place to work at home, to make sure everything's in the server. Here's your backup files. So we're probably a little bit more prepared because we're used to hurricanes. But in the rest of the world, they're not as prepared. There was no plan. You're right.
Yeah. So I think we're 3 P's in: people, product, process. Proprietary is next. Let's go over
So
that.
that's the number one value driver. That will raise your multiple. And everybody's like, well, what's a multiple? A multiple is a number times EBITDA that you will get paid on your business. So the more synergies you have, the higher multiple you'll get on your business. Also, the higher EBITDA you have. If your EBITDA is over $1 million, that's going to raise your multiple. If your EBITDA is over $1 million, you're going to have a lot more buyers, which could create a bidding war. We're very good at creating bidding wars on what we do. So proprietary is number one. The more well branded your business is, the more I can sell your business for. Think about this. What's the biggest brand in the world? The most valuable
Well,
brand in the world right now? What?
Apple.
Apple. Nobody ever gets that right. You got it right. $189 billion just for the brand. Billions. That's not including EBITDA. That's not assets, inventory, real estate. That is just a brand alone. So
Sure.
build your brand. As long as your brand is still relevant in the mind of the consumers, we can sell your brand for a lot of money. Nobody's going to pay for Blockbuster
Yeah,
because
I
we're
think we've seen
relevant.
it's turned into the era of like the fanatical into brand wise. You got Apple, Tesla. things like that
But it's
where
always been that way, like Heinz, it's
sure.
always been that way. Coca-Cola, it's always been that way, and it will always be that way. So branding is huge, but just remember this: a brand can fall out very quickly. Like Toys R Us went out of business; their brand is not worth a lot right now, right?
Hmm.
So you got to make sure your brand is relevant. Number two is trademarks. Get everything trademarked. So many business owners start a business or buy a business. Think about this, or buy a business, and they never check to make sure, like they'll get a state trademark, but they never check the federal database to see if they can get a federal trademark. So somebody will be operating their business 10, 15, 20 years and all of a sudden receive a cease and desist letter in the mail and have to stop using that name.
Right.
And then you have to start branding all over again.
And
So
that can be
make sure you
devastating. Yeah.
get a federal, oh, it's devastating. It happens all the time. You'd be shocked. Make sure you get a federal trademark on your company name. Exit Rich, I got a federal trademark on your podcast. Get it trademarked because otherwise you could literally be out of business and all that time, energy, and effort, money you invested in your brand is gone. Okay. Patents are really important too. Patents will bring you a lot of money. We sold a company for $18 million that had 18 patents. Do you ever watch Shark Tank?
I do.
And what do they always ask on Shark Tank every
Do you have
time?
a patent on this product?
Right. Do you have a patent? Do you have a patent? Do you have a patent? So get a patent, protect it. The other valuable thing in proprietary that will drive up the price is contracts. So any type of contracts, manufacturing contracts, vendor contracts, distributor contracts. If you're a franchisor and you have franchisees, very valuable. Also, client contracts. Client contracts are the most valuable of all because buyers want to buy cash flow.
Sure.
So contracts with customers proves cash flow.
Right.
However, here's the caveat to contracts. I will tell you, I've been doing this 20 years in the trenches, thousands of businesses sold. No owner ever has a transferability clause in their contracts.
I was just going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have that two-sentence transferability clause. Very, very, very important because 99.9% of all deals are asset sales. So if you don't have that transferability clause, your deal will fall apart. Okay.
So are you saying that let's say I have a certain client that I have a contract with and I sell my business. Are you saying that most of the time there's a loophole for your client to exit out of that contract when the new owner takes over?
Yes, absolutely. I know a franchisor that sold had 1,500 franchisees. The buyer did no due diligence. Their attorneys didn't really do due diligence either. That's what they're getting paid for. And when the close happened, they had a big meeting to introduce, the new owners and have a rah-rah party for all the franchisees. Two franchisees out of 1,500 transferred over. Two.
Wow.
Two. The buyer ended up having to file bankruptcy. They sued their attorneys and everybody on the due diligence team and won, but they ended up having to file bankruptcy because they didn't do their due diligence. So they can't force franchisees to come over. If that transferability clause is not in there, then franchisees can do whatever they want to. In this case, franchisees went out and started their own franchise.
Oh,
They
crazy.
all gang
So
together
they all
and
ganged up
started their own
together.
franchise. Yeah.
Okay.
So make sure you have that
Make our own
transferability
deal.
clause because your clients can wiggle out. Absolutely. And
All
then
right,
the
we're
other
getting down
big
there.
thing is
Next,
no, no, no.
patrons.
You got to know this.
Okay.
Databases are very valuable.
Yes.
Databases. Facebook paid $19 billion for WhatsApp, and WhatsApp was hemorrhaging money. So you could be out there in the e-commerce space or the SaaS business, and you could be losing money like crazy. But if you have a bunch of users, buyers will pay a lot of money for that. So WhatsApp had 1 billion users, and Facebook knew they could monetize and ROI that.
Yeah. Data is
Yeah.
huge, especially now.
Yeah.
We're talking patrons next on the P's.
We are. The only other thing I want to mention about proprietary is IP real estate. So if any of your clients are in e-commerce, or if any of your listeners are in e-commerce, and let's say they manufacture bedding or pillowcases or whatever, and they're number one on Wayfair,
Mhm.
guess what? A strategic will pay a lot of money for that. Let's say you have a skincare product and you are number one on Oprah's list, on Oprah's favorite things, and Oprah is endorsing you. Huge. You've worked with celebrities before. Celebrity endorsements add a tremendous amount of value and will
Mhm.
create a bidding war. And that's part of proprietary. Now we can move on to patrons.
Okay. Sounds good.
So patrons is really your client base. You know, most businesses follow the 80-20 rule, which 80% of their revenue comes from 20% of their clients. If you lose a couple clients, you could practically be out of business. So, and you also want to make sure you don't have customer concentration. You need customer diversification. Also, I know your listeners are mostly younger listeners, but you know, I have clients that have been in business 20, 30, 40 years, and their customers have aged out and they did nothing to innovate and go after those millennials. And millennials don't purchase products and services the same way that baby boomers do. So you really got to make sure that you innovate and diversify and go after that younger market. Otherwise, you'll be out of business.
I think the theory is to capture them young and keep them. I mean,
You can
correct?
capture them young and keep them, but baby boomers, when they start aging out, they're not buying at the same level they used to.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's the problem. So you always got to make sure that you're innovating, innovating, innovating. That's the
Definitely.
number one reason businesses go out of business is because they stop aim. Aim is always innovate and market.
Totally makes sense.
Okay. And then
Uh,
the last P, which you're probably anxious to get through the P's, is is process. You've been patient. I'm sorry, profits.
Profit. I was going to
Everybody
correct
wants
you, the
to
one who's done the piece.
profits. Everybody wants to be in business to make money. So here's the deal, Derek. Profits is never the problem. Never the problem. It's always a symptom of not running on one of the other five P's. Clients will come in and say, Michelle, I have a profit problem. I'm not making any money. I'm like, no, you have a people problem. You don't have any people. You know, you're doing everything yourself. I was partnered with a business owner in the graphic space, and he's like, I have a profit problem. I'm like, no, you don't. You're making great profit. What you have is a people problem. You have one employee, husband and wife, and nobody's billing, nobody's collecting money, nobody's doing this, nobody's doing that. You know, so profits, lack of profits is always the symptom of not having the right processes, not having the right people, not protecting your proprietary, not having, diversified patron base. It's always a symptom, never the problem.
That totally makes sense. You got to invest in people to increase your profits.
You
So
do. Yep.
let's move on to if you got your business, you need to prepare your business to sell. Now let's get to the actual sales process. What do you think, first of all, are the biggest things that people overlook when they're preparing their business for sale? We're talking, I know we talked to prepare your business, from the start. Let's say just before you want to sell, what's some of the biggest things? An owner will come to you and say, okay, I'm ready to sell. What did they miss?
Everything we've been talking about. They don't have the right people in place, so therefore their business is not sellable. I have a chiropractic clinic we're trying to sell right now. And when he came to me, he's like, well, I have two chiropractors. Well, guess what? No, you don't, because they both told me that they're leaving once you're gone. So now we're back to ground zero and he has no chiropractors. So making sure that the business can run without you
Yep.
is number one. Because if the business is dependent upon you, and it takes a skill like chiropractic, or it takes a skill like dentistry, or it takes a skill like interior design, or a lawyer, or something like that, it's very difficult to sell. Not impossible, but extremely difficult. Does that make sense?
Totally.
The other big thing that they overlook when they come to me is their financials. They have no idea what they're making. No idea. They'll know their top line, their gross revenues, but then when I ask them, well, what's your net income? What's your seller's discretionary earnings? They always look at me like a deer in the headlights. Oh, I'm making
Like,
about,
what?
I'm making $500,000. And I'm like, I look at their tax returns and it's $75,000 net income on the bottom line. I'm like, 75,000. Okay. Do you have the rest of this and personal expenses are not reoccurring? And then
Right.
that's when we have to normalize the financials. So a lot of times they think they're making more than they really are. And because they're living out of the business and running personal expenses through the business, they've never have kept good records. So they don't know what they're running through the business. And they expect me to be psychic and know exactly what they're running through the business, or they expect their CPA to tell me, and their CPAs don't know. Their CPAs don't want to know. So really documenting your financials. And if you are going to run your car and travel, meals and entertainment donations, contributions, etc., have a list and keep up with it every month, every year, so that when you're ready to sell, you can make sure you tell your advisor exactly what you're running through that business, and then make sure that you can prove it. Because if you can't prove it, we won't add it back, because in due diligence, the buyer's going to make you prove it.
Exactly. So during the sales process, what are some of the biggest things that hang up or slow down the process, or even cause a buyer to back out of buying a business?
So, okay, number one, not being able to prove what they're running through the business and not being able to really prove their income. Not having transferability in contracts, not having
Which we brought up earlier.
transferable
Yes.
contracts, right? The other thing is not having the right people, not having a management team in place. So if the owner is leaving and there's no manager, it's like we're trying to sell a manufacturing company right now, a fabrication company. Two owners, both partners, equal partners, been in business for 30 years, four employees. You take these two owners out, there's nothing. All the information over the last 30 years, and like, oh, we can make anything for anybody. But where is it? It's all in their head.
Yeah.
So not having the policies and procedures in place, you know, not really, you really got to have, like, if there's not a level of management in place, there really has to be a documentation of what's in that owner's head. Does that make sense? If I could
Definitely.
just plug up a computer to all of my sellers' head and drain their battery,
And
drain
then
their
put it on a
head,
hard
and
drive.
put it on a hard drive, we'd be able to sell it so much quicker.
We'd see some good
Um,
values for the businesses.
non-competes, non-competes is another big one. You know,
Sure.
if there's a management team or, salespeople or some, employees that are crucial to the business, if there's not non-competes, that could hold up the sale or cancel the sale altogether. Um, Not having protected your IP, meaning that you're really trying to get paid for your brand, but you don't have a federal trademark, and then we just find out that somebody else has a trademark on your company name.
Makes sense. So we had kind of spoken off air before this, and our listeners very well know that one of our co-hosts, Sam Marks, has sold multiple businesses, all the way up to $100+ million for one of them. He says in his experience that selling a business worth 2 million versus 100 million has proved to be just as much work. Would you agree with that?
I would
Or
say selling a $2 million business is harder work.
okay,
It's
explain why.
harder. Well, because a $2 million business is not probably in all likelihood not operating on all six cylinders.
Sure.
So they're probably missing stuff. They're probably missing people. Processes are probably not, efficient, productive, well documented. They might have some IP issues with their contracts, whereas $100 million company typically has all their ducks in a row, right? They've got the people in place, they got their management teams in place, they have the non competes, they obviously have efficient, productive processes, or they would have never got to $100 million.
Right.
So they're operating on all six P's. They protected their IP, they protect their proprietary. Also, the bigger the business, meaning the higher the cash flow, the more buyers we have.
It's a bigger
So
pool.
therefore it's easier and quicker. So I think it's it could be harder to sell a $2 million business versus 50, 60, 70, 80, $100 million business. There are more buyers for good businesses than there are good businesses to buy.
That makes sense. And
So at that level, we have a
that's
lot
the
more
rarefied
buyers.
air of kind of the cream of the crop businesses. So
Correct. So it's harder because, then also for $2 million business, our financials are probably a disaster.
sure.
If they go clean everything up, when it's $100 million company, they have audited financials. The
Sure.
financials are audited. Everything runs pretty smoothly. You don't get to $100 million company and not have everything run smoothly and not have all your ducks in a row.
Totally makes sense. So in your experience, have most of the M&As you've seen use brokers or corporate advisors? And in either case, what are some of the fees involved when you're selling your business?
So repeat the first question in M&A. Repeat that one
Um,
question, please.
do most of them use brokers or corporate advisors for the sale?
I would say, well, let's define this,
Sure.
because you got brokers, business brokers that sell pizzerias and coffee shops and restaurants and flower shops and dry cleaners, and then you got M&A advisors like me that sell companies 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, 50 million and up. So they're not going to hire a business broker to sell a $75 million company, but they will hire a mergers and acquisitions advisor. They typically don't hire a corporate advisor. They might hire, if they think they have a buyer already in mind, then they might work with an M&A attorney to try to facilitate everything in their CPAs.
Okay. And then what kind of fees are typical
So
in a
here's the
sale?
deal. So what's typical in business brokers is well, a lot of business brokers now are charging retainer fees like $5,000, $10,000. M&A advisors typically charge, anywhere from 25,000, 50, 60, 100,000, depending upon the size of the transaction. And then the commissions, it depends. I mean, I've seen brokers charge 10%. I've seen them charge 8%. I've seen them, do Lehman scale, which is 6, 7, 8, 9. I've seen them do reverse Lehman. My firm, I don't charge retainer fees. I'm probably one of the only M&A firms that doesn't charge a retainer fee, because the reason for that is I'm the closer. Remember? And if I don't think I can sell your business, I'm not going to take it anyway. And to me, that just speaks volumes and credibility and
So just to
volumes
be
that
clear, should your business not sell, you're still going to pay the retainer fee.
no.
Okay. No,
If your
no, not
business
to you,
doesn't
but
sell, you're not
in
paying
in
me. Yes, to
in
other
in
advisors.
other
If the
cases,
business
yes.
doesn't, look, I have clients that come to me all the time that can say, "Oh, if you charge a retainer fee, I'm not going to work with you," because I had one client that hired three different firms. One firm charged 75,000, another firm charged 60, another firm charged 25. He paid all three. None of them sold the business, and I did, and I charged zero. And so a lot of these companies are out there charging big, hefty fees and they can't close deals. In fact, a couple of them have called us and asked us if they could close the deals once they charge these fees. So, I'm not going to say I'll never charge retainer fees, but right now, I don't charge retainer fees because I'm results driven. And I just feel like if I can't sell your business, then why are you paying me?
That totally makes sense. You believe in yourself and you're willing to prove to work for your fee.
Right.
So let's talk about the book. Obviously, that's why we're here. I think this is your third book, correct?
This is my third book.
So what can we learn from this book that we haven't in the first two already?
Oh my gosh, so many things. Well, first of all, I wrote "Sell Your Business for More Than It's Worth" in 2013. That was my first book I ever wrote, and that was more surface level about how to sell your business. And that was in 2013. And the business landscape has changed dramatically since then. It used to be that 95% of startups would go out of business, so 1 to 5 years were very risky. But then when I wrote Exit Rich in 2019 and 2020, I did the same research and learned that guess what? It's only 30% of startups will now go out of business. Only 30%. So all of you startups, go start your businesses.
get to work.
Get to work. About 27.6 million businesses. Those businesses have been in business for 10 years or longer. 70% of those companies will now go out of business. So Exit Rich is all about how to stay in business, not just how to sell, but you got to have something to sell. So
Yeah.
how to stay in business, how to weather the financial storms, how to innovate, how to focus and make sure that you don't lose that market share, how to stay competitive, how to stay relevant. It's all the nuts and bolts that you need to have a successful business. I mean, even Steve Forbes endorsed our book and said, "Oh my God, this is a gold mine for entrepreneurs, and every single entrepreneur should read Exit Rich."
Yeah, you got some powerhouse people here helping you along with this book. So
I do.
one that really stuck out to us as a book that we brought up many times on the show is Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Mhm.
The co-author on that book was Sharon Lechter, and you actually got her to co-author with you on this book. How did that come about?
I did. I tell you, the first time I met Sharon Lechter, we shared a stage together, and I was so intimidated by her. I was actually I was so intimidated by her. Like, I was afraid to talk to her. I don't know why. And I'm never intimidated by anybody. But last night I was on her birthday show. She had a birthday yesterday. So reach out and tell her happy birthday.
Yes, happy
But
birthday, Sharon.
yeah, so I was on her Zoom birthday. So like I'm part of the family now. But I have a good friend of mine, a good mutual friend of both of ours, David Corbin, and he knows I'm wanting to really make some of the lists like New York Times. And he goes, "Well, you really should get a co-author." And he goes, "You should partner up with Sharon Lechter. She should write this with you." because she's a CPA, she's a financial literacy expert, she's been an advisor to several different presidents, and her husband is an intellectual property attorney. And she goes, "That's a perfect fit for you."
Sure.
And I said, "How can I get her to write with me? I can't even talk to her." I was so intimidated at first. It's like, "Oh, Michelle, let me work it out." So he sent her the manuscript and she goes, "I love it. I absolutely love the manuscript. I want to be part of it." Yeah.
Very
So
cool.
that's how I got her.
One more famous person we talked about. We brought it up twice already, I think. Shark Tank. Kevin Harrington was one of the original sharks on that show, and he actually writes the foreword for Exit Rich.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
So I've known Kevin for years. I met him again speaking on stage. I meet a lot of people speaking on stage. Kevin actually used to be a business broker, believe it or not. Back in the day before he got into the "I seen on TV" king, he was a business broker. So him and I have always talked over the years about selling businesses and doing deals and all this stuff. And him and I are part of a mastermind, BA, which is a mastermind that we both belong to. Plus, he's very good friends with Sharon. And we both asked him, and he said yes, of course.
Great.
Yeah.
We actually just started our own mastermind here with our Invest Like a Boss listeners. We love it. It's really fun.
Oh, awesome!
So last pitch. Why
You have to
should
invite me
we
to come
go out?
speak at it.
Yeah, we'll invite you. Why should people go out and buy Exit Rich, which is available now, by the way? Tell us where they can get it and the number one reason just to pick up the book.
Well, if you don't want to exit poor, you should pick up the book to exit rich because there are so many principles and strategies and techniques that Steve Forbes agrees with, that Brian Tracy agrees with, Tom Hopkins, Jack Canfield, Mark Victor Hansen, Sharon Lecter. This book is just all about the principles and strategies of how you really have to think about, not just think about like a business owner, but really think about, you know, what's the end game here? What's the big picture here? I'm probably not going to leave this business to my kids, so how do I stay in business and how do I retire rich? So all of those strategies are there. And look, 70% of businesses are going out of business. There's obviously a huge demand for this book right now, and 8 out of 10 businesses do not sell. So those are all the reasons you should go pick up Exit Rich. And we're in the middle of pre-sale, so you can go to exitrichbook.com and get the book right now for $24.79, which is less than Amazon. And that includes shipping to anyone inside the United States. So we will email you the digital download immediately when you order the book. We'll ship the hardcover to your doorstep. Plus, you will get lifetime membership into the Exit Rich Book Club. What does that offer? That offers me doing video training, really teaching on these different principles and strategies. But even better than that, it includes document downloads. Clients ask me, "Michelle, I've never seen a non-compete before, an employee handbook, an organizational chart. I don't know what a sample due diligence checklist looks like, or a sample letter of intent, purchase agreement, closing docs." All of those documents, like, people pay thousands upon thousands of dollars for these documents. They're right there for your download for $24.79. You'd be crazy not to. And then we also include a 30-day membership into my club CEOs, which is a like-minded entrepreneurial group where we really ask those transformational questions that help business owners survive and come on the other side of this pandemic and really thrive so they can exit rich.
I love it. Sounds like you get a lot of valuable content for the book. Check out exitrichbook.com. We'll also put the link in the show notes and anything else you want to add, Michelle. Thank you so much for your time, for coming on Invest Like a Boss.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was fun. Thanks, Derek.